Good afternoon. So when I was walking towards the procession, I noticed a hat. Someone was sitting there. On the hat, it said 6 years. And I went over to this young woman. She presumed it was to congratulate her, was to tell her, I have you beat. It took me 7 years to graduate. Where are you over there? You want to stand up first? Come stand up for a second. Come on. How you doing? You know what you represent? You represent the tenacity of Molloy students. You stuck with it, and I hear that mom and dad want you to get a master's degree. I don't know where they are, but I endorse that decision. Congratulations. All right, anyone here from Queens? All right. You're as loud as I remember. It's good to see you. Thank you to President Lentini, Vice President Thompson, the Board of Trustees, and the entire Molloy leadership and faculty for having me today. It is so great to be back here because I have so many memories and touch points. Any Jets fans here? Okay, all right, my condolences. The team was never better than when I ran it. Just spent a ton of time here. So on the way here, I decided to take a detour. I was on the LIE and got off at exit 29, Springfield Boulevard, and I pulled over, and I just sat there staring into space at the intersection and was having a flashback. When the light turned red, I envisioned a 10-year-old boy darting into the intersection, cradling fresh carnations in one arm. It was like he was shot out of a cannon, like one of those ball kids at the US Open in Flushing. And he scampered so quickly that you knew he only had 35 seconds before that light would turn green. And he would knock on each passenger window and go. Back then you had to roll down windows and say, please roll it down. Would you like to buy some fresh flowers? It's been 40 years since I sold flowers on that street corner every single holiday, including graduations, because I knew mom and dad would be feeling really generous today. And I would stand on that intersection. That little boy was me. I was living in a shoebox apartment just a few blocks away, taking care of my sick mom, selling flowers and scraping gum under tables at the McDonald's party room on Horace Harding wasn't going to pay the bills. And I knew the cavalry was never coming, and I had to do something to save her life. With nothing to lose, I took advantage of a loophole. I dropped out of high school at 16 to get my GED. The parents are all shaking their heads right now. Don't do that. Knowing that if I could just do well enough on that one test, I could start Queens College and get a better paying job. On my last day at Cardozo High School, I walked into my science room to return my unopened textbook with a smug smile on my face. And looking straight ahead, my science teacher, Mr. Rosenthal, said, deadpan to the class, Higgins, what a waste. I'll see you at McDonald's. Well, he obviously got that, everyone's like, oh, well, he obviously got that prediction wrong because I'm here delivering your commencement address. What Mr. Rosenthal didn't understand, and everybody in this room does, life is not dictated by where you begin or even where you end up. It's how much distance you cover in between. And the way to cover the most distance, more than you could ever imagine in this great life, is to repeatedly ask yourself one simple question. Now, in a few decades, you will sit on a quad watching your own child graduate, beaming with pride, feeling nostalgic about this day, and they'll say to you, Mom, Dad, who is your commencement speaker? And at that moment, a blank stare will wash over your face, because you'll be old like me and you will not remember my name. I don't know, honey, some guy who sold flowers on Springfield, but he did share the one question that changed his life, and it changed mine too. Why not me? Every person in this Coliseum will inadvertently end up in 3 sliding door situations. No one is spared, I'm sorry, where we must make a choice from which everything else flows. First, you will settle for less than you're capable of. I wrote a book called Burn the Boats about what it takes for human beings to realize their full potential. And last May, I received a DM from a 25-year-old woman named Isabella Epstein. Hi, young entrepreneur here, just read your book and took the leap the day after I finished to pursue Kindred. Now, my first reaction was like, uh-oh, is she saying that she just quit her job after reading my book to launch a startup? That's nuts. So I jumped on the phone with Isabel and I said, tell me your story. During the pandemic, she was feeling so lonely in her New York City apartment, and despite being in a city with 8 million people, she found it so hard to form meaningful human connections. She had a great job, crushing it, making 6 figures at a bank. A first-generation immigrant from Colombia, she was living the American dream, except it wasn't her dream. She had a different one that she kept returning to at night, of a social media platform for spontaneous hangouts for Gen Z to deal with the loneliness issue. Yet every time she surfaced the idea to the powers that be, the people who get to decide how our lives turned out, she was met with a mix of skepticism and condescension. Isabella, you're a banker, you're not an entrepreneur. But all she needed was one person, or in this case, one book, my book, to hold up a mirror to her potential. After quitting her job as a banker and using her last savings to survive, Isabella went on to raise $1 million, is now a self-made millionaire, and next month she'll introduce her company to the world called Kindred. At those times in life when you find yourself settling for less, a fleeting vision of a different life will appear. Don't dismiss it as fantasy. Some detractors will try to convince you that your inner voice is a sound of arrogance, but you'll know it is the guiding hand of providence. Now, when you take those first tentative steps in the direction of your new life, you'll feel like an imposter. I certainly did when I became a guest shark on Shark Tank, a guy from Queens with a GED who used to hustle flowers, competing against Mark Cuban and Mr. Wonderful. You too will be met with resistance and riddled with self-doubt. But remember, imposter syndrome is actually a feedback loop. It's not evidence of your own inadequacy. It is proof that you won't settle for mediocrity. When you are on the brink of a breakthrough and feel like a fraud, be defiant and ask yourself, why not me? Second, you will tolerate unjust treatment from someone very close to you, maybe somebody you love. Studies show that exactly half the people in this Coliseum would describe themselves as people pleasers. I've always been fascinated by that stat because it explains so much about human behavior. Of the 5 most common toxic traits I've observed and studied, the most insidious is what I call a withholder, because it's so subtle. A withholder knows that half of you need approval to maintain your sense of self-worth, and they know how to exploit this perceived weakness to their advantage. Now, I say perceived because it's not a weakness. It is the source of your empathy. This type of leader is unable to deliver praise or feel happy when someone else steps up. They are wired by insecurity or the need for domination. Withholders show up in personal relationships too. The partner who moves the goalpost to keep you destabilized. So no matter whatever you do is never good enough. So why would we allow a boss or a love interest to treat us poorly? 2 reasons. We don't know that something better's out there, so we take what we can get. Or we don't believe we deserve better. We feel unworthy. Yet again, your inside voice will fight for what's right. When you begin to challenge injustice, examples of something better start sprouting up all around you. The excitable friend who has a new love interest and their partner doesn't try to put them in their place. They push them to places they never dreamed possible. The selfless mentor with no agenda who just wants to see you shine. Pay attention to these signposts. They have been put in your life for a reason. So at those times when you are subjugated, when defiance begins to stir from within you, and you begin to crave the nourishing treatment you see others enjoying, ask yourself, why not me? Lastly, you will feel like a victim when tragedy strikes, and it will. When I was a little boy, I spent so many nights with my mother in the ER room at Long Island Jewish Hospital, less than 15 miles from here. Anybody going to work at LIJ when you graduate? There you go. As her weight ballooned to 400 pounds, her health problems just compounded. We didn't have health insurance, so we treated the ER room like our primary physician. I remember sitting on the curb where the ambulances would pull up and studying for my law school finals through the night. We were so familiar with the hacks of emergency care that I remember my mom telling me, no matter what condition I had, it could have been strep, make sure you tell them your neck is really stiff. I'm like, why, Mom? Because they'll think you have contagious meningitis and we'll get out of here really fast. That was my childhood, spent in the ER room. In my teens and early 20s, I always knew I was in a race against time to outrun and outwork my mother's failing health. At 26, I received the opportunity of a lifetime, named the youngest press secretary in New York City history. In just one decade, I had covered so much distance, from selling flowers on the street corner to making $3.75 an hour at McDonald's to $100,000 a year. I could finally get my mom the care she needed and the space I so desperately craved. On my first day of work at City Hall, April 2nd, 2001, she called me to say an ambulance was taking her, yet again, to Long Island Jewish. But by the time I got there at 11 a.m., she had died. This part's always hard. I couldn't understand why, after all those years of work, she would die on the very same day I had secured our future. It seemed so unfair. For years, I was confused and guilty that the greatest professional triumph of my life happened on the worst day of my life. Was I even permitted to be proud? I felt like a victim. Nothing added up. That is, until years later. I was 32, had a huge job running the New York Jets, a 3-month-old newborn at home. Finally, everything felt right, except a throbbing pain in my right testicle. Within 48 hours, my entire life changed. I was under the knife and diagnosed with testicular cancer. I remember thinking, I finally feel secure. God, why me and why now? And then I read the story of the ancient Greece Olympic wrestler Milo of Croton. Now, Milo had a very unorthodox workout regimen. He would train by carrying on his shoulder the same baby calf up the steps of the Olympiad. As the calf grew bigger and bigger, Milo continued to carry him up the stairs until one day that baby calf had grown into a bull. You see, the heavier the burden Milo shouldered, the stronger he became, and the more Olympics he won. As painful as life can be and will be, every setback you endure will create proportionally more capacity to pursue what you love, and you will never be asked to carry more than you can handle. I began to reframe my relationship with my disease. I started researching who else out there has testicular cancer right now and wondering, what are they going through? It's a very exclusive group. Every year, only 9,000 men between the ages of 20 and 40 are diagnosed with testicular cancer. 9,000. Of those men, 400 will die. 700 have no health insurance. 5,000 live paycheck to paycheck. It became so clear to me that I was much better equipped to endure cancer than anyone else I could think of. And since, statistically speaking, 9,000 people were destined to experience testicular cancer that year, if not me, then who? Who other than me should bear this burden? My mother's death prepared me. That was my bull to carry. And I went out and had dog tags made that I wear to this day. Close your ears, President Lentini, so it's a little bit off color. Half the, twice the man. So, sanitized for the group, but I still wear that under this robe. I've been wearing it for many, many years. And the point of that is to own it defiantly. When tragedy strikes, instead of feeling sorry for yourself and believing you're destined to be a victim, remember all the pain you have endured, prepared you for that moment. And instead of wondering, why me, ask yourself, why not me? A few years back, I had the honor of a private audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican to discuss human rights. Now, I'm not a particularly good Catholic, but I am very good at Catholic guilt. And so his message resonated with me to this day. He told me, quote, go to the periphery. Go to the periphery of society where you will find the most profound human suffering. Don't create distance. Seek proximity to pain so you can be in a position to do something about it. Looking out today, I'm thinking about how many of you will soon live those words in your career. I'd like to acknowledge all of the nurses who are graduating today. Would you please stand up for a minute? Let me see you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, in all the hundreds of hours I spent in the ER growing up, to be honest, it wasn't the doctors who brought comfort to my mother. They never had the answers. It was the nurses who put hands on her broken body, ice on her ankles, hot, swollen, and cracked from her being sedentary all those years. It was the nurses who would treat her as a person still worthy of compassion. Yes, doctors may have the power to save lives, but nurses have the grace to save someone's dignity. And a life without dignity feels hopeless. I leave you with what I replied to my science teacher after he said I was a waste before I walked out of Cardozo for the last time. Now, you didn't think a guy from Queens was going to let him have the last word, right? So I turned to him with my hand on the door. I said, well, Mr. Rosenthal, if you see me at McDonald's, it's because I own it. And I was like, oh, all right. To the class of 2024, never let anyone convince you that your past puts a ceiling on your future. It only sets the floor. And for all the blessings you pursue and all the burdens you must carry, always ask yourself the one question that has the power to change your life. Why not me? Thank you.